My research focuses on executive career success and executive career paths. My new article that has just been published in the Harvard Business Review looks at top executive career paths and top executive backgrounds in the Fortune 100 companies, which are the largest employers in the United States. I've co-authored this article with Peter Cappelli at the Wharton School and with my colleague here, Rocio Bonet at IE Business School. And we compare these executive career paths across 3 time periods: 1980, which is really the last peaceful year before a large recession in the United States, 2001, and 2011. In fact, this article is a follow-up article of the research that I published with Peter Cappelli in 2005, and where we compared the profiles of executives in 1980 and 2001. We actually observed 3 major changes between 1980 and 2011. First of all, we see increasing diversity in the top echelon. In 2011, 18% of top executive positions are held by female executives. This is, by the way, a considerable increase compared to 2001, when 11% of these executive positions were filled by women, and a huge jump compared to 1980, when the proportion of women was 0. We also see more executives who were educated outside the United States. In 1980, the proportion of foreign educated executives was 2%, and now more than 1/10 of the executives were educated outside the United States. But don't expect too much there, because the majority of these executives, close to 80%, come from Anglo-Saxon English-speaking backgrounds. In other words, they were educated in Canada, Australia, or in the UK. Second, we see major changes in executive career paths. First of all, in 2011, a much smaller percentage of these executives are lifers. That is, that they are leading companies where they started their career. Between 1980 and 2001, executives' attachment to corporations decreased significantly. We see a significant jump in organizational tenures, number of years spent at the organization, but interestingly, this trend reversed between 2001 and 2011. We see longer tenures at the executives' organizations, and we think that this is because of the financial crisis that started in 2008 and that really bound individuals to corporations. And the third trend that we are observing relates to the educational background of executives. 2011 executives have more years of education than their counterparts in 1980, and they are also more likely to have graduate degrees. The composition of educational institutions has also changed. We see a major decrease in private universities that don't belong to the Ivy League, and a corresponding jump in public universities. So we kind of see a democratization of educational institutions in the United States. But mind you, this democratization doesn't concern Ivy League universities. The share of Ivy League universities has held pretty much steady in those past 3 decades. It hovered between 10 and 14%. I would characterize the new career landscape by 2 words, uncertain and mediated. And I say uncertain because the 2008 financial crisis has affected every professional in serious ways, but it really shattered the employment prospects for the youngest generation of employees, where the unemployment rate is still the highest. And I say mediated because labor market intermediaries, such as social media, are increasingly responsible for matching job seekers to hiring organizations. 15 years ago, you probably mailed your resume and application materials for a printed job ad, and that would be almost unimaginable today. Organizations increasingly attract and also screen job seekers on the social media, such as LinkedIn or Facebook. Based on this article in the Harvard Business Review, young managers should really heed 3 pieces of advice. The first relates to educational institutions, the second is related to the trade-off between general managerial and narrow functional specialist career paths, and the third one really relates to tenure in organizations. First of all, the first piece of advice that I would give to young managers is that they should think strategically about their educational institutions. Elite in the US Ivy League institutions are still very dominant in the top executive ranks, and they are even more dominant in chief executive officer positions. A large fraction of CEOs graduated from the Ivy League, especially if they were hired to the CEO position from the outside. So elite institutions still matter, and they can still shape career paths in very visible ways. The second piece of advice is that young managers should really consider the trade-offs between embarking on a general managerial career path or on a narrow specialist career path. General managerial career paths normally take longer to propel their incumbents to the very top. However, they are the most effective way to reach top-tier positions, which comprise, for example, the position of the chief executive officers. Although specialist career paths are shorter, they normally don't lead to tier 1 positions. And finally, my third piece of advice to young managers would be: have a balance between internal and external moves. When we analyzed the career histories of the 2011 top executives, we found that the average executive worked for fewer than 3 organizations. In other words, they were not jumping widely across companies, across employers. So my advice is that if you jump across companies, then make sure that the next time you spend a longer stint at an employer and you do your best to be promoted there. Our research, as detailed in the Harvard Business Review, finds that executive backgrounds and executive career histories have considerably changed since 1980, when we started our investigation. Specifically, we see increasing diversity in the top executive ranks. We see executives' greater level of education, and we also see varying attachment of executives to their employers.